In this video, we will show you how to replace your front caliper. Let's get started. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing you're going to want to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. Once you've done that, continue on by removing your center cover. We'll just use a small pry bar for that. With that out of the way, continue on to removing each of your 5 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Take one of your lug nuts and put it right on here to hold that rotor in place. Now that we have the lug nut on there, go ahead and move right over to your flex hose. That's this area right here. We're going to have to restrict the brake fluid flow all the way down to the caliper. Take some hose pliers and carefully crimp the flex hose. Once you've done that, continue on by putting a collection bucket underneath this area. You'll continue on by removing the banjo bolt. That's the bolt that holds the flex hose to the caliper itself. To remove it, use a 14mm socket. Once you have the flex hose off of there, continue on by removing each of your gaskets from the banjo bolt. Slide that right out of there. Inspect the banjo bolt, make sure it's still reusable. Set that aside. Inspect each side of your flex hose, make sure it looks like it's still in good condition. That looks fine. Now let's have a look from the back side of the caliper. We're going to need to dismount the entire caliper from the steering knuckle. You'll find that you have two 18mm bolts holding this in place. Remove the pair. Inspect your hardware as you remove it. Replace it as necessary. Remove the caliper. Let's recycle the brake fluid from inside the caliper. The next thing we'll do would be to remove the pads from inside this area. We'll use a small pry bar and carefully press this down. Once it slides into the center, you can slide it right out of there. Give your pads a quick inspection, make sure they're still reusable. If it looks like they're worn at an angle or damaged in any way, you have to replace them. Get that other pad out of here as well. Quick inspection, set that aside. There it is, friends. Okay, friends, let's get ready for our installation. Go ahead and turn it around to the back side. On the back, you're going to find two 14mm headed bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket. Remove the pair. Inspect your hardware. Continue on to each of your slider pins. That's this area here. We'll go ahead and give that a little twist, holding onto the boot and pulling it out. You'll notice that one of the slider pins has a little vibration dampening boot on the end. The other one won't. It's important to make sure that you put it back in the same place that you had removed it. Something that's important to mention is you want to especially pay attention up inside this small groove. That's where the boot is going to sit. Make sure it's clean and free of any dirt, debris, or rust. That way no moisture can make its way in and rust this area. Continue on to removing your caliper slider boots. For this, you can notice as I start tugging on it, it's going to want to separate. Make sure it's clean, set it aside, and do the same to the other. Let's continue on with adding a little bit of high temperature caliper lubricant to each of the areas where your brand new caliper tins are going to sit. This will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction overall. Take the tin and slide it into the locked position. Once you have it pressed down, reach into the center and lock that in. There we are. Go ahead and give it a tug to make sure it's secure, and then do the exact same thing on the other side. Once both of the tins are installed, carefully lift up on the bracket. Use a little bit of high temperature caliper lubricant just inside the very end of the hole here, where your caliper slider boot will go. Take that caliper slider boot. You'll notice on one end, you have the bezeled area here with a small groove. That's going to fit into the caliper bracket and hold it tight. We'll press that right in. Give it a little spin to make sure you work in the grease. Do the same on the other side. Now we can continue on to lubing each of our caliper slider pins. Make sure that you lube the entire shaft of the pin itself. And as you're doing this, you also want to make your way all the way up into that top groove closest to my fingers. That'll help make sure that no dirt or debris make its way inside that caliper boot. Slide it into position. Press it in as far as you can, squeeze out the air. Go ahead and give it a little spin to work in that grease. Do the same to the other slider pin. Let's take that caliper bracket and slide it over the rotor. Start in each of your mounting bolts and snug them up. Torque each of the caliper bracket bolts to 118 foot-pounds. Slide your brake pads into place. Continue on to adding some of your high temperature caliper lubricant to each of your caliper pistons and the backside of each of the 3 forward ears. At this point, you can put the caliper in place. With that in place, continue on to each of your slider pin bolts. Once these are snug, torque them to 27 foot-pounds. The next thing you'll want to do is clean and inspect your banjo bolt. Make sure you don't have any of the pre-existing gaskets still on there. Continue on with your 2 brand new gaskets. Slide one directly onto that banjo bolt. Now we can take the flex hose. We'll take that banjo bolt and put it through the side that has this lip here. Take your other gasket and put it on the other side of the flex hose. That's going to go between the flex hose and the caliper itself. Go ahead and put that into place, putting it in by hand. Once you have it started in, you can go ahead and snug it up. After it's snug, torque it to 35 foot-pounds. Once you've done that, continue on to removing your hose pliers. Check the flex hose to make sure it's not twisted in any way. All right, we're at the point that it's going to be time to start bleeding the brake system. To do this, we're going to start by gravity bleeding. Take your 10mm wrench and turn your bleeder screw counterclockwise. At this point, you want to wait until you see a steady trickle of fluid coming out of this. After that, we'll close it off and we'll continue with a manual bleed. All right, now that we have a steady trickle of fluid, I'll go ahead and close this off. Let's perform our manual bleed. Before you continue, make sure you double check the master cylinder. Make sure it's full. If it's not, top it off with .3 brake fluid. To do a manual bleed on this, it's going to be easiest having a second person. The other person should be inside the vehicle. We're going to have them pump up the brake approximately 3 times and hold it on the last time. At that point, they'll let us know they're holding. We'll open this up and wait for fluid to come out. We're trying to pay attention to make sure we don't see any air coming out of it. If you see a little bit of air, continue the process until you only see fluid. Go ahead and pump up the brakes, please. All right, I saw a little air. Let's go ahead and pump it again. Go ahead and pump. Still getting a little bit of air bubbles here. Go ahead and pump. All right, at this point I can see that there was no more air coming out of this bleeder screw. If you wanted to, you can continue the process just to double check. I feel confident we should be good to go. Go ahead and clean up your mess and reinstall your bleeder screw cover. Let's remove that lug nut and install our wheel. Once the wheel's up on there, start on all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. We'll snug them up and get the wheel safely back on the ground. With the wheel back on the ground, torque these in a crisscross manner to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. Install your center cover. To top off your brake fluid, you want to come right over to your master cylinder located on the driver's side. Open up that cap, inspect the level. If it looks like it's low, like I said, use a little bit of .3 brake fluid. After that, reinstall your cap. Make sure it's nice and tight. Aside from that, thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.